Welcome everybody to Live from the Farallones. My name is Lishka Arata, and I'm Senior Communications Coordinator with Point Blue Conservation Science. So today we'll be coming to you live. We are coming to you live from the Farallones. And the Farallon National Wildlife Refuge is about 30 miles west of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's only accessible by boat, and it's not actually open to the public, which is one of the reasons why we're super happy to be able to show this special place virtually to you all. Looks like some of you have spent some time out there, judging from the chat. That's wonderful. So our aim with these live programs is to engage all of you nature lovers in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond in the Farallon Islands conservation efforts, led by Point Blue and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we hope that these programs will help increase your awareness and excitement about all the ecological uniqueness of this island ecosystem. So a little bit of background, the Fish and Wildlife Service manages this protected area, and Point Blue is proud to have partnered with the service through a cooperative agreement since 1968 to lead the scientific research on the island. And all of our work helps to inform management actions and support the wildlife ecosystems out on the island. So a tiny bit about our awesome host today. Pete Warzebach is a senior marine ecologist with Point Blue Conservation Science. He oversees the research activities out at our long-term research station. And he has spent a lot of time on the island. So he has spent over 2,400 days living and working on the Farallon Island. So I would say probably top expert on the Farallones in the world, close to that. So pretty exciting to have him host today's program. He's originally from New York, but has been in California for a while. And when he's not on the Farallones, he's working at home in Minnesota. So today we're going to be focusing on not a bird, but a mammal, the northern fur seal. So I'm going to pass the mic to Pete. And before I do that, I'm going to be turning the chat off, and I'm going to ask everybody to enter your questions into the Q&A. I see we have one already. Jim Lewis, former Farallon biologist in the 1970s. Awesome. Thank you for joining us today, Jim. So yeah, please ask lots of questions throughout the program and ask them through the Q&A function. I'll still keep an eye on the chat. And if you're joining us via Facebook, go ahead and put your questions in the chat in Facebook, and I'll transfer them over here to the Zoom, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. So thanks everybody for joining, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Pete.
Great. Thank you so much, Lishka, for the introduction and for setting up these live from the Farallones programs. It really is an honor to be able to share this place with everyone who's out there tuning in today. As Lishka mentioned, I've spent a lot of time. I've been working out here for 22 years and more than 2,400 nights spent on the island. So it's been the main part of my life for a long time, and it's an incredibly special place. So it's really fun to be able to share this with the public today through this miracle of modern technology. When I started here, all we had was a radio link to the mainland, and now we can stream video. It's incredible. But I'm here to talk to you. I'm here on Weather Service Peninsula today. So we're actually at a remote location away from our site. And I'm here to talk to you about fur seals. So what I'm going to start first, I'm going to hop behind the camera and give you a little tour around. And then I'll get into a little discussion of the fur seals, and hopefully I'll leave plenty of time for questions. I'm going to just pop behind the camera and show you what we're looking at. So here we are on Weather Service Peninsula, and pretty much right in our field of view here are a bunch of northern fur seals. And you know, it's a little bit flat lighting because everything is brown and black, and so are the fur seals, so they blend in a little bit. But you can see they're fairly unique. They're dark colored. They have extremely long hind flippers, which really sets them apart from any of the other seals and sea lions we have on the island. In fact, there are 5 species of seals and sea lions we have on the island. Besides northern fur seals, we also have California sea lions, Steller sea lions, northern elephant seals, and harbor seals.
This is looking out at Weather Service Peninsula, so you see this little group of fur seals. And then panning up, this is Main Top. So that is actually the next island over on West End Island. There's a little channel over there that we cross a couple times a year to go over and do surveys. But for the most part, West End is a designated wilderness area. So we minimize the amount of human traffic over there, and there are no structures or anything to keep it as a wilderness for the wildlife. I'm gonna just give a pan around here as we go to the right. Lishka, let me know if I'm making anyone seasick by going too fast. So just coming into view, just off the side of Main Top, you can see the North Islands. They're about 5 miles north of here. And there's a little reef. You can see the waves crashing between us and the North Islands. Keep coming across. There's a Western Gull. We talked a lot about those during our summer program. They kind of rule this island. Here's our communication setup. This is what allows us to talk to you today. Sorry, that's in the screen, but we need it. Coming back around, now we're looking at Main Top Bay. A couple pelicans flying over. These are the islets. So if you happen to tune into Jim's talk a couple of weeks ago about sharks, he was up at the lighthouse, and you could see these from a different angle. So now we're looking at them from kind of the south. Before we were looking at them from the east. Just coming back around. There's a little blind up there on the hill that we study cormorants from. And at the very top is the lighthouse. We have several people up there right now. Today is an exceptionally good day for songbird migration. With these kind of low overcast skies, but still good visibility. A lot of migrating birds end up over the ocean, and then when they come down below the clouds in the morning, the only thing they can find is the Farallon Islands, and so they drop in here. We've had quite a few eastern warblers and stuff show up today, and yesterday we had over 1,000 geese. You can see the houses there, just to the left of the rock in front of us. And then going back out to Moronga Bay, Saddle Rock. And finally, back around to Weather Service Peninsula and the star of our program, the Northern Fur Seals.
I hope you enjoyed that tour, and if you have any questions about what you were seeing or what I was saying, please pop them into the chat. As I mentioned, fur seals are one of the 5 species of seals and sea lions that we have on the island. One of 3 species of eared seals. So there's 2 main types, those seals or sea lions that have external ear flaps and those that don't. So the fur seals, California sea lions, stellar sea lions all have external ear flaps. And then our harbor seals and elephant seals do not have any visible external ears. So even though they're called a fur seal, they're really more of a sea lion. That's the way naming goes sometimes. Fur seals are really cool. They're also different from some of the other species I already mentioned, you know, the way they look. But they're a very pelagic species. So they spend most of their life way out at sea. They'll forage hundreds of kilometers away from the island during the breeding season. And during the non-breeding season, they'll go even farther. They'll travel all the way up to Alaska and back, much like the elephant seals do. But they feed offshore in those really deep waters. They're also primarily a nocturnal feeder. So at night, the fish and squid that they rely on come up to the surface as it gets dark, and the fur seals are targeting those species. So that's different from the other seals and sea lions we have on the island. Fur seals are also the smallest of the eared seals that we have on the island. They look fairly big. If you look, see, do we have a pole down here? So you pan over this way a little bit and get that.
The one laying down?
Yeah. So there's a bigger animal down here. It's actually subadult male, not a full bull. But the biggest one that we have here behind me right now. And fur seals, when they're pups, they're about 10 or 12 pounds. When they grow up, so that sub-adult male and the female that was laying next to it, females will get to be about 4 foot long and maybe 100 pounds, where the adult males will get to be about 7 foot long and up to 400 to 500 pounds. But that kind of pales in comparison to some of the other sea lions we have out here. For example, the stellar sea lion. Stellar sea lions can maximize at about 11 foot long and over 2,500 pounds. So the fur seals are fairly small, but their diminutive stature is outweighed by an extremely fierce personality. Fur seals are by far the most fierce and aggressive of all the seals we have on the island. And when they're setting up to breed and they're defending their territories, they will routinely chase off the larger sea lions, including male stellars. So, you know, a little 400-pound male fur seal will chase off a 2,500-pound male stellar sea lion. And they're just really aggressive. They're growling, they're biting, and they're like a little buzzsaw coming at it. So the stellar sea lion just doesn't want anything to do with it and finds another place to go. Cool fact, the scientific name of fur seals is Calorinus ursinus, which roughly translates to sea bear or bear-like. And the reason for that is because you can see a little bit when you're looking at them. They're very stout, muscular animals. They have very strong foreflippers, which they use to move around. And they have very thick, dense fur. Again, why they're called fur seals, but also why their scientific name likens them to a bear. They have this very thick, dense fur. So just for fun, we like to do this on our live programs. I like to ask questions and get the audience involved a little bit. So knowing that fur seals, you know, have this really great dense coat of fur, why don't you take some guesses in the chat? How dense do you think their fur is? So density is measured in number of hairs per square inch. So pop into the chat how many hairs per square inch you think a fur seal has. And I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. And as a bonus, which mammal do you think has the densest fur coat of any mammal? And so I'll come back to both of those in a minute. But the fur seal, hence its name, is really prized for its fur coat. And it was this quality that brought people to the Farallones in the 19th century to harvest fur seals and collect those pelts to sell to the market. When the fur seals were first visited by humans in the late 1700s, the first people to land on the island, they found over 100,000 fur seals breeding here. On West End behind me, on this weather service peninsula where we are now, and even over onto the main island out on the marine terrace in front of the houses. The entire place was likely covered with fur seals. And so they came here, and once they discovered the colony, it didn't take them long to realize that this was a very valuable commodity. Back in those days, before we had, you know, tech clothing and cheap textiles, animal pelts were still the standard for high quality, warm, waterproof gear. It's what Patagonia would have been in the 1700s. And so they came out here to harvest those fur seals, and they would collect the pelts, bundle them up, and then ship them off to China and other markets in Asia where they would sell at a good price. And so starting in about 1810 to about 1840, both American and Russian fur sealers came out to the Farallones. They established a base here, and they started a commercial operation harvesting fur seals. And over about a 30-year period, they reduced the population from over 100,000 fur seals down to less than 60 animals. And then at that point, it became, you know, less profitable. But still some fur seals were harvested, and within about another 10 years, fur seals were completely extirpated, completely removed from the Farallones and from California in general. So this was a major factor in really shaping the Farallones and shaping what's happening with fur seals population. So we get any guesses in the chat yet?
Let's see here. Sea otter. Someone guessed 300,000. There's also a few questions in here as well.
Okay.
You want to answer those?
Sure, but let me get to that one thing. So whoever gets 300,000, if you didn't cheat, congratulations. You are correct. If you looked it up on Wikipedia, shame on you. But that is correct. 300,000 hairs per square inch on the pelt of a fur seal. So they don't have a lot of blubber, so they really rely on this fur to keep them warm. And it's one of the densest of any mammal in the world. And also, somebody guessed correctly, the densest is the sea otter, which is around 400,000 hairs per square inch. By contrast, I just have to look at this one because I didn't know this off the top of my head. Humans have about 800 to 1,200 hairs per square inch. So just to put it in perspective, you know, it's really dense fur. Imagine if you had fur like that on your arms or on your head. You'd never be cold again. We can go on to answer a couple questions.
So if the fur seals are offshore so much, do they sleep in the water?
Yes, they will sleep in the water. Oftentimes you'll see rafts of fur seals, kind of like you see rafts of otters in Monterey Bay. They'll just be floating at the surface. You'll see their tail flippers just kind of sitting there and they're dozing off.
And then someone asked, do the different species hang out together or do they specifically avoid each other? Do they compete in any other way?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So they do compete. There will be some intermingling, but as I mentioned, the fur seals are extremely aggressive and they will actually chase off many of the other seals and sea lions. So what you end up seeing is, at least for the main breeding areas, are segregated by species. So where the fur seals are having their pups, there's really very few sea lions. Where the stellar sea lions are having their pups, there's very few California sea lions. And then where the Californias are, they're pretty much by themselves. But the non-breeding animals will all intermingle and haul out in the same areas. So there's some mixing at the haul out areas, but at the breeding sites, they're fairly well segregated.
Brian Bainbridge asked, in 1980, we would occasionally be visited by a single individual. Can you touch on the evolution and seasonality of the population system?
Excellent. Brian, great to have you on. It's always great to have a former Farallon biologist tune in for these as well. Yeah, that's part of the history of the Farallon fur seal populations that I was going to get to. So during, you know, when they were being hunted and then eventually extirpated from California, there were very few fur seals left. They were also hunted at their other breeding grounds in some of the islands off of Russia and in Alaska. Fur seal breeding distribution goes from far northern Japan all the way around through the Aleutians, up into the Farallon Islands and the Bering Sea, and then down into California. But there's actually a big gap between California and the Aleutians. There's nothing in between. So no fur seals in British Columbia, Oregon, or Washington. But when the California population was extirpated, there was small numbers of them that survived on remote islands in the Aleutians, in the Commander Islands in Russia, which are out west of the Aleutian chain, and on the Pribilof Islands in the Bering Sea. And then in early 1900, I believe it was 1911, there was a fur seal treaty signed by all the nations around the northern Pacific to halt the commercial harvest of fur seals. We were still allowed to harvest them for small numbers and for subsistence hunting for native communities, but it drastically reduced the commercial impact on these populations. And then you had things like the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the establishment of Farallon Islands National Wildlife Refuge, Channel Islands National Park, other protected areas, which gave refuge for these animals to begin to recover. So in, I believe it was 1972 or so, the first fur seal was seen again on the Farallons after more than 120 years of absence. So, and it was obviously a very exciting find, but they weren't breeding here yet. And so over the 70s and much of the 80s, there'd be a few that would show up every once in a while. You'd see them haul out. Maybe there'd be a handful that came up and were among the California sea lions, but very few. And then in 1996, the first pup was seen on the island, again, since the early 1900s. So this incredible find in 1996, the first pup was born. And I started working here a few years after that. So my first year out here was 2000. So 4 years after the first pup was born. And when I started, there was, you know, maybe you'd see a dozen animals in a year and you'd see 2 or 3 pups. But since the late 90s, around 99, 2000, the population has been growing exponentially. So it's been multiplying every year. And this past season, so they breed in the summer. We finished our census for them, and we had estimated 2,400 pups born in 2022. So this incredible recovery of the population after they were protected with regulations to stop the hunting, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and then given places like the Farallones where they could take refuge and recolonize. So it's actually one of the greatest conservation success stories, I think, for the refuge and for our involvement here at Point Blue out on the island. Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but hopefully it answered the question. Any other questions?
Someone just asked, does climate change affect this population?
Probably. Climate change is obviously affecting everything in the oceans. As oceans are warming, as we're getting more extreme heat events like marine heat waves, as we're getting more extreme storm events, we're seeing that impact build up through the food web. So it changes the populations and distributions of their preferred forage species, those fish and squid that they're eating. It changes the overall productivity of the oceans. Sea level rise will also impact these colonies because right now we're a little bit above where they are, but if on the left side of your view, you can see some sea lions right down near the water's edge. They'll pup very close to the water's edge, and as the sea level rises, that's going to inundate some of these pupping areas and force them to move. And then finally, as the fur seal population continues to grow, they're going to spread out. They're going to start pupping over here probably sometime in the next few years, and then maybe even eventually onto the main part of the island. And that's going to cause a redistribution of the other wildlife on the island. So then any climate impact, that'll be a stress, and then any climate impacts will just be exacerbated by this competition for space. That's really all I have for you as far as designed or premeditated talking points. So I would just be happy to open it up to any other questions about fur seals or about the Farallones in general.
I don't see any current questions.
Nothing?
Oh. We should ask a question. Why is this location you are called Weather Service Peninsula?
Oh, all right. Cool question. Yeah, Weather Service Peninsula. So we are on kind of the far western extreme of southeast Farallon Island. As I mentioned, that's West End Island with the big hillside behind me. This is called Weather Service Peninsula because back in, I believe it was 1902 or 1903, the newly established National Weather Bureau at the time decided to build a weather station out here on this peninsula. The little depression you're seeing behind me, and you might even see like the concrete steps below me here. This is where they built their facility. So there was a house here. There were a couple of scientists stationed here. They were tasked with doing weather observations a few times a day, and also with setting up and testing a brand new exciting technology called radio, where they could actually transmit information from the Farallones to a radio station on Point Reyes. And so they set this weather station out here for the main purpose of radio communications and weather observation. And so it's pretty cool to think about where we've come from, 1910, or I think it was 1913 when the Weather Service left. They didn't have a lot to do. Their radio station had actually been replaced by another one on a different part of the island. So they cut it down to just a one-person crew, and the story goes, I don't know how much of it is true or not, but the story goes that that person got a little stir crazy being out here by themselves and eventually set the house on fire so that they would be taken off the island. So that was the end of the Weather Service's time on the island. But you think about going back to that time, and I wonder what they think about when radio was a new technology, the ability for us to do something like this today with live streaming video from a place like the Farallones. But it would totally blow their minds.
Ready for next question?
Sure.
Is the growth of the population due solely to birth rates, or are some of them coming from other colonies? Genetic mixing?
Excellent question. So when the California area was recolonized, all those animals were coming from primarily the Aleutian and Commander Islands in Russia. So those were where the remnant populations were. And San Miguel Island in California's Channel Islands National Park was the first area recolonized. And I believe that was in the 50s where they started having pups on San Miguel Island. And then as that population grew, much like ours has, it was growing exponentially. Animals from San Miguel eventually started to colonize the Farallones. So they came from Russia and the Aleutian Islands in Alaska down to San Miguel, and then from San Miguel recolonized the Farallones. And we know this because a lot of animals, there are a couple down here that have tags, little plastic tags in their flippers. Can't really see it on the camera, the resolution isn't good enough, but what we know from those tags is that those animals were tagged on San Miguel Island and then eventually came, usually as pups, and then eventually came up here and established a breeding colony. So it's a combination of immigration from that San Miguel colony and intrinsic population growth.
What are your top research priorities for the Farallon Islands?
Oh, for the Farallon Islands in general, that's a big question. Our top research priorities are, well, one, I guess, whatever individual studies are needed to inform effective management of these populations so that they can thrive and continue to recover. There's a lot of different little studies that we do from time to time or that come up when Fish and Wildlife Service or NOAA that manages marine mammals, when they need information, those kind of studies are prioritized. Prioritize studying the impacts of climate change on Farallon wildlife. That's a big focus of Point Blue in general, but certainly our Farallon program. And then the other thing is looking at how the wildlife on the Farallones can inform us of changes in the marine ecosystem. So changes in the breeding success of seals and sea lions and seabirds, or in their diet, tells us a lot about the overall health of the ocean surrounding the Farallones. So I'd say those are the top three general research areas.
So what is the most fascinating thing you have ever seen during all your time on the Farallones? Coolest artifact or thing to watch ashore?
Ooh, most fascinating thing I've ever seen on the Farallones. That's hard because there's so many crazy, beautiful, amazing things to see out here. I haven't actually had that many interesting artifacts wash up. It's a pretty harsh environment. There aren't really any beaches here for stuff to wash up. So if something does come in, it usually gets smashed to bits in the intertidal. We have seen some glass ball floats that somehow don't get smashed. We've seen some soda bottles and stuff from Japan that wash up out here. There was one time when some tools, which apparently had fallen off of a boat, so a reciprocating saw and a circular saw washed up in one of the coves. So that was kind of interesting from a human standpoint. From a wildlife standpoint, I mean, the most impactful thing has been watching these wildlife populations recover over my 20 years out here. So like I said, the fur seals, there were very few of them when I started. Now we've got thousands of them here. Similar with common murres among the breeding seabirds. There were 50 to 60,000 when I started. Now there's 300,000. So watching these wildlife populations recover has been the most impactful. And then craziest bird is always a question because the Farallon Islands, of course, are known for migration, hot migration location, and lots of vagrant birds. So the craziest one that I really ever found myself was the northern gannet. It seems a little mundane now because it's actually been hanging out here for 10 years. It was May 25th, 2012 that it showed up on the island, but northern gannets are only in the North Atlantic, and this is the only one known to exist in the Pacific Basin. And it's been hanging out at Farallones for 10 years now. So that was pretty crazy sighting when it showed up.
Do you have any crazy stories about any seal interactions you've had or heard of from the island?
Interactions with each other or with people? Mostly, I've seen some pretty gnarly fights between the different seals and sea lions. There was one I remember from a couple of years ago with two male stellar sea lions were battling over a territory. And like I said, they can be, 11, 12 feet long and 2,500 plus pounds. So it's like two Humvees crashing into each other. And that was pretty exciting and crazy to watch. And then with the fur seals, we've been doing a project the last few years working with Tony Orr and other partners at the NOAA Marine Mammal Lab to tag the seals here so that eventually we can get survival data and recruitment and find out, when they come back, how many of those pups survive, whether those our pups are going and emigrating to some other colonies, information like that. And so the first time getting to go over and actually work hands-on with these animals and do some tagging, they're just amazing. And even the little pups, these 6 to 10 pound critters are seriously fierce, and they will come after you, and they'll come at you growling and baring their little sharp teeth. So you want to be careful working around them, and you have to respect that. Don't put up with anything personality that they have.
Someone wants to know, what will the rest of your day look like after this talk?
That's a good question. I think, this has been, like I said at the beginning, a really good day for migrating birds. So I'm going to take a walk around the island and see what I can find. We already had a few eastern warblers, a black-throated blue, a chestnut-sided, a magnolia. A few other good things are showing up, so I'm going to go around and look for those and see what else we can find. I have some office work I need to do, and then it's my turn to cook dinner tonight. So around 5 o'clock, I'll start cooking dinner for the crew.
Question from Lisa. What sort of experience do you need to be a seasonal researcher on the Farallones with Point Blue, and how would someone apply?
Great question, Lishka. So the second part is easiest to apply. You can go to our website, pointblue.org/careers, and we'll have the opportunities posted on there. We'll also post them on some of the common conservation job board that you see out there, like Society for Conservation Biology, or Mammalists, or and so on. The qualities we look for, we typically look for people, it's a learning opportunity. We're trying to get people who are early in their careers, get them experience, train them up to be conservation biologists and research biologists in the future. So we're looking for some experience working in remote environments. It doesn't have to be on an island, but somewhere so that you know that you can handle being isolated from friends and family and creature comforts for a period of time like you are when you're out here. We look for people that have some experience working with wildlife, whether that's doing surveys or working as a vet tech or and doing songbird banding, anything like that, depending on what season we're hiring for. So some experience with remote work, some experience working with wildlife. And usually we're taking people who are finishing undergrad or just finished undergrad, about that level of education.
Do seals ever predate on eggs or chicks?
Very rarely. So I've never seen it with the fur seals, but we did have back 2006 or so, I think it was. It was a very poor year. It was very warm water. The ocean wasn't very productive. And so the sea lions during the summer, the California sea lions were struggling. They were not doing well, having trouble finding food. We were seeing a lot of really skinny animals. And at one point, we did see a few young sea lions crawl up into the seabird colony and actually grab mer chicks. I don't know how much actual nutrition they get from that, but I think they were desperate and so they were exploiting that source. But generally speaking, you don't see too much interaction between the seabirds and sea lions.
Do you get attacked when you walk close to beached groups?
Oh, the pinnipeds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's what they're asking.
You probably would. So, when we try to make sure that we're not causing disturbance whenever possible. So we try not to walk too close to beach groups. This is about as close as you want to get to the animals. You can see that, they're pretty calm with us around here, but you don't want to walk up to them or approach them when they're near the water. When we are doing the tagging work, sometimes you'll get charged by an animal. They'll come after you. So you want to be extremely careful in that kind of environment because they're wild animals. Whenever you're working with a wild animal, the safety of the animal and the safety of the people working there is the most important thing. And always be aware that they're just defending their territory or their pup, and you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to minimize their distress.
Jim Lewis says, talk about the sounds you hear behind you.
Great question, Jim. So mostly what we're hearing are the California sea lions and the waves breaking. California sea lions are by far the most vocal of the sea lions out here. They're constantly barking and making all kinds of noise. It's a little bit hard. The fur shields behind us are actually making noise. They make like a high-pitched little clicking and whistling call, but it's drowned out right now. The speaker on the tablet isn't quite strong enough to hear that. A little bit more, yeah, you can hear a little bit of gulls in the background as well. And that real deep roar is a stellar sea lion that's in the cove behind us over here. Oh, and Stella found something to look at. What do we got?
Like there's a pico with a...
Oh, okay. Any other questions?
What are the black dot birds on the rocks behind you? Oh,
Those?
form.
Oh, over here on the rock are cormorants, Brandt's cormorants, and the small black dots on the rocks over there are actually more persons. So there's actually on the rocks over there, because the camera, we're keeping them far away, but there's a lot of pups hauled out on that rock, just on the lower part of main top. But over here, there's Brandt's cormorants hauled out or roosting on the lower part of main top. There's very few seabirds around right now compared to what it's like during the summer. During the summer, like I said, there's 300,000 mers, about 400,000 total seabirds on the island. This time of year, there's probably 10 to 12,000 total of all the seabirds. So much reduced. They're off at sea for much of the winter or roosting on the mainland and foraging near shore. And of course, we have flies, as you may see crawling on me every once in a while. The kelp fly, native to cormorant colonies, or the cormorant fly, I should say, native to cormorant colonies and seal colonies and islands off the coast here. And they like to crawl on us.
What are you making for dinner tonight? I have heard you eat very well on the island.
We do eat extremely well here on the Farallones. Everyone takes turns cooking for the crew, and they really go all out. So you only have to cook once every 6 or 7 days. So you try to make something good. I haven't decided what I'm going to make tonight. I have a couple ideas. I might make mac and cheese, or I might make something called sweet potato burritos, which is an homage to another former Farallon biologist, Russ Bradley, who I worked with out here for many years. Stella's voting for sweet potato burritos.
Was the slope behind you, main top, the primary area for the mer and gull egg harvesting in the 1800s?
Oh, good question. Probably not so much on main top. Mers were there are some MERS up high on Main Top, but that is a difficult area. I'm sure they did harvest there, but the colonies are much bigger and more dense on the other side of the island, so behind the lighthouse that we looked at before. And on those slopes on the main island is probably where most of that harvest took place. And for those not familiar with that, in the early 1900s or the late 1800s, when San Francisco was a boom town and there weren't enough supplies to support the growing population, people came out here to harvest seabird eggs. And the common mer egg was one of the most sought after. And at the time, there were 500,000 or more MERS breeding on the island. Much like with the fur seals, the overharvest of the eggs knocked that population down to only a few thousand by the time they stopped harvesting. Thankfully, over the intervening century, MERS have been recovering again, with the islands becoming a refuge. This habitat is protected for them, and they've been able to recover. Now we're up to around 300,000. If we don't have any other questions in the box, Lishka, do you want to add anything? Otherwise, I'll just plug our next program.
All good.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today from the Farallones. I'm really excited we got to take you over here and show you some fur seals. Not many people actually get the opportunity to see them. So even if it's virtually, you can consider yourself pretty lucky to have seen these amazing animals. Join us for more. We'll send out information on upcoming live from the Farallones events. Our next one will probably be sometime in early 2023 about elephant seals. But we'll see if we squeeze another one in next month or not. And then keep your eyes on Point Blue socials for information about some of our other live from programs at our Palomar Banding Station or at a marine lab in Point Blue. And check out our website and the website for the Farallon Islands National Wildlife Refuge and their social media for more information about the islands. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.